Today we'll be reading a story called Yeh-Shen. Yeh-Shen is a traditional story. A traditional story is a fairy tale. You know some fairy tales, like Cinderella. So fairy tales tell about events that could not happen in real life. So I want you to be aware as we read of things that might not be true, things that could not really happen in real life. Fairy tales also teach a lesson. So they usually have a happy ending, and at the end, it is teaching a lesson that we can learn from. This week, we'll also be talking about sequence of events. And remember that an author of a story often tells story events in the order that they happen. That's called sequence of events. So you're going to be thinking about the story events, which will help you understand the author's message or what you can learn from the story. So let's get started. So Yeh-Shen is written by, or the illustrator is Jill Dubin. Jill Dubin always loved art, even as a child. She and her sister used to spend hours making dolls out of paper. Ms. Dubin used paper to make the pictures for Yeh-Shen. First, she sketched each picture. Next, she picked pieces of paper with different colors and patterns. She cut out pieces of paper and placed them onto the sketches. The backgrounds and the characters' clothes are all different pieces of paper glued together. That's like a collage. So the question that we will be asking ourselves this today as we read is, what can you learn from reading a fairy tale? So be thinking about the lesson that we will be learning as we read. Yeh-Shen was a girl who grew up in China a long, long time ago. Her mother and father had died, so she lived with her mean stepmother Jin and her stepsister Jun Li. They lived in a cave. Every time Jin looked at Yeh-Shen, she became angry. Yeh-Shen was gentler and kinder than Jin's own daughter, Jun Li. Yeh-Shen was also a hard worker. Jun Li was spoiled and lazy. Jin gave Yeh-Shen only rags to wear. She gave her long lists of chores to do. When Yeh-Shen finished one task, Jin added 3 more to the list. So how are the sisters different? So we know that Yeh-Shen is gentle and a kind and hard worker, but her sister is mean and lazy. Yeh-Shen was always busy working. She did not have a chance to make many friends, but she did have one very special friend. This friend had golden eyes, glimmering scales, and a big, beautiful tail. It was a fish that lived in the pond. Every day, Yeh-Shen stopped by the pond and shared some crumbs with the fish. Every day, the fish popped up to greet its friend. Yeh-Shen's stepmother saw this and became furious. She didn't want Yeh-Shen to have any friends, not even a fish. One day, Jin caught the fish and cooked it for dinner. So remember that Yeh-Shen was very lonely because nobody was nice to her and she had no friends, but she did have one friend, the fish. Yeh-Shen cried when she saw her friend served for dinner. She ran out of the cave and sat by the pond. "What's the matter?" an old man asked her. Yeh-Shen told him about her friend the fish, then told him what her stepmother had done. "Listen carefully to me," the old man said. "The bones of that fish hold special powers. Take the bones and bury them in 4 pots. Put 1 pot at each corner of your bed. Whenever you need help, tell the bones what you need. They will make every wish come true." Yeh-Shen followed the old man's directions. When she got back to the cave, she buried the bones in 4 pots. Then she put the pots by the corners of her bed. She did not have anything to ask for yet, but she felt content knowing that her friend was close by. A few weeks later, the spring festival arrived. At the festival, young men and women could meet. They hoped to fall in love and marry. Jin didn't want to ruin Junli's chances of finding a husband, so she ordered Yeh-Shen to stay home and clean. Then she and Junli went to the festival. What does this remind you of? Does this remind you of another story that you know? Maybe Cinderella, who wanted to go to the ball, but she had to stay home and clean. So think about how she must have felt when her stepmother cooked her the fish, which was her best friend. What a terrible thing to do. She was so very sad and unhappy. How does she make herself feel better? Well, remember, she was told to bury the bones of the fish into 4 pots, and it would bring her luck. So let's see if that does happen. Yeh-Shen did not want to stay home and clean. For the first time since she buried the bones, she had a wish. I wish I had beautiful clothes, she said to the bones. I wish I could go to the festival. I wish I could be like all the other girls. As soon as Yeh-Shen said the words, something amazing happened. She was covered in the finest clothes from head to toe. Her old worn shoes were replaced by a pair of slippers made from silk. Yeh-Shen was overjoyed and grateful for the gifts from her friend. She ran off happily to the festival. So let's compare the old man, her friend, to someone in Cinderella's life. Who was that like? The fairy godmother, that's right. Everyone at the festival stopped to stare at Yeh-Shen when she walked in. Who is this beautiful girl in the magnificent clothes? Yeh-Shen had a wonderful time at the festival, but was worried that her stepmother would notice her. She decided to hurry home, but she ran so fast that one of her silk slippers fell off. Does this sound familiar? Silk slipper or glass slipper? It lay in the middle of the road. It was the only sign that Yeh-Shen had visited the festival. At home, Yeh-Shen stuffed her new clothes into the pots. She concealed her one silk slipper too. Remember what concealed means? She hid it. She changed into her rags and waited for her stepmother to return. How do you think she's feeling now? I hope her stepmother didn't notice her. Meanwhile, a traveler found the silk slipper on the road. He knew it was valuable, so he gave it to the king. The king was curious to find the owner of the slipper, so he had his men build a hut. Anyone could come to this hut to try on the silk slipper. How is that different from Cinderella? So in this story, the girls have to go to a hut to try on the slipper. In Cinderella, they came, remember, the prince and his footmen came to their houses. So that's a little bit different. Yeh-Shen heard about the hut. She wanted her slipper back, so she sneaked out of the cave one night and ran quietly to the hut. As she crept toward the slipper, the king's men grabbed her. The king took one look at Yeh-Shen's rags and thought she was a thief. Yeh-Shen looked up at the king. Her eyes were filled with tears. The king saw how gentle and kind she was. He listened to her words. Please, I will show you the other slipper, Yeh-Shen whispered to the king. Yeh-Shen led the king to her home. She put on the matching silk slipper and her fine clothes. The king knew then that he wanted to marry her. The king, however, he was angry at how Jin and Junli had treated Yeh-Shen. He told them never to come to his castle, so they stayed in their cave for the rest of their lives. So, let's think about, in this story, our sequence of events. So what happened first? So remember, in the very beginning of the story, Yeh-Shen was very sad, right? She lived with her stepmother and her mean sister. And she was very unhappy because all she had to do was cook and clean. Next up in the story, she met a friend who told her that after her best friend, her fish, was cooked for dinner, this friend told her that she could take the bones of the fish and put them in pots and make wishes, and hopefully they would come true. So what did she do? That's right. She put the bones in pots. She made wishes, and they did come true. She was able to go and meet the king at the festival. And at the end of the festival, she ran home hoping that her stepmother wouldn't notice her and lost one of her silk slippers. And just like in Cinderella, she had the match, and the king found her. In Cinderella, it was a little different because it was the prince, not the king. But in the end, she was able to find happiness with the king, and the stepmother and her sister were banished off to the cave. So they learned their lesson. So, what is the lesson in this story that we have to learn? Well, remember, at first, the king saw Yeh-Shen and thought she was a thief because of the way she looked. He made a judgment about her based on how she looked. What changed his mind? What changed his mind was that gentle and kind look she had in her eyes. And he knew just by the way she looked and the way she acted that she was a kind person. So she gave her a chance, and he trusted her and followed her home and found the matching slipper, which caused him to change his mind and want to marry her. So the lesson to be learned is if you are gentle and kind and do the right things and you're a good person, good things will happen to you. And that is the end of our story.